and welcome to episode 173 of the PowerScore LSAT podcast. For the very last time, this is Dave Killoran in Napa Valley.
And not for the very last time, and I'm also probably referencing Dave. I got a feeling. This is John in Los Angeles.
All right, John, it's been a long, terrible week and weekend of the October LSAT. A strange and difficult test to parse out.
It's been an odyssey.
How are you feeling?
How am I feeling?
Yeah.
Buddy, I'm a bag of emotions.
Aw.
A buffet of emotions. I feel, on the one hand, obviously, I'm glad that the test is over. For most people, there's a retest next week, which is obviously useful and a nice safety net. But for most people, they and we can say goodbye to this test. I think what I'm sadder about is the fact that I'm going to say goodbye to you.
Well, you and I will forever be friends, so this doesn't affect that.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are wondering why John is starting down this maudlin path, this is
I haven't even begun.
My last podcast officially with PowerScore. I think I'll come back, John, and you and I will have some conversations over the next month or two, almost retrospectively about some of the things that have happened in the LSAT world in the last 20 to 30 years.
I'm not going to let you quit me.
Yeah, it'll take some time to walk away, but I am leaving PowerScore the day this comes out, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But as I always tell LSAT students from the past, just because I'm leaving PowerScore, I'm always there to help. I'm not going to turn my back on people who've been my friends in the past or needed assistance. That would be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's, people have said it's bittersweet, but I feel really positive about it.
Well,
I need a break. We'll see what happens thereafter. The world is an unknown. Things could be very different in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but I'm going to take at least a few weeks off here.
Yeah.
In the meantime, John, you're the man in charge. But since this is my last episode with you where I'm the co-host, I have chosen the songs and my drink. So I'm going to start off with what I'm drinking because it's not one drink, it is 2 drinks. You got to go out with a bang.
Yes, well, I suppose. What are you drinking?
Well, first off, on the recommendation of a good friend, somebody that I trust, I am drinking, to start, a Last Word.
Can we clarify? Are you double fisting?
Yes, that's what we're doing. The energy's high here.
Why didn't
I'm ready to go.
tell me? I've only
Well,
got one.
I got to do my own thing.
All right.
Got to walk my own path, just like you
clearly.
do. The reason the double fisting is going on is because the Last Word is really gin based, it's about 1/4 gin, and I don't like gin that much. It's got chartreuse and cherry liqueur in it, as well as lime juice. So it is kind of like buried underneath this fruity chartreuseness. But that's one thing. And then the other drink, of course, is my old standby, my number one favorite drink in all the world for all time. And that is a White Russian.
Well, that feels fitting, I suppose. If you're going to put some sort of bow on this thing, some end to the odyssey of it all, episode 173. Can you imagine that we got this far? When we started.
You'll continue marching on, so it's just me taking a divergent seat for a while.
I need to talk about that for a second, but first, let me tell people what is fueling me talking about it, which I've done a similar thing, because I knew this was going to be kind of a commemorative episode of sorts. I've got a very old bottle of Macallan. It's an 18-year-old bottle of Macallan. It's old enough to date, as far as I'm concerned.
Nice. That's appropriate for this last episode, sure.
Yeah.
You can't hesitate to go there, do you?
Appropriate's out the window.
This I won't miss.
Thanks. Oh, you won't? Oh,
no.
I thought this was the only reason keeping you around. Anyway, it's delicious. You would hate it. I'm kind of jealous of your White Russian, but
it's the tastiest drink in the world.
Yeah, you make really good ones, and you and I have seen some sunrises. Cheersing White Russians together. I don't think we've seen the last sunrise together, brother. I love you.
Sure we have.
I love you very much, and this is a sort of a sad but exciting time. I mean, what I think this podcast will probably evolve into, for better or very possibly for worse, is going to be a mix of things, a melange, where I'm going to sometimes do some individual solo things. I'm going to sometimes have on guests, like other kind of industry heavyweights, guys that are friends of ours, like Mike Spivey, who you recorded a podcast with recently, Jay Wyatt, Seven Sage, who is great, Ellen Cassidy at Elemental, who's obviously amazing. I'll do my best to try to wrangle these people in and fool them into doing it. And then at times we're going to have internal people come in and help me out because nobody wants to listen to me, ramble on for an hour.
I've had to for
I
years,
know. So you can be
why
the
are we
first
visiting this on other people?
You'll be the first to say don't. So I'll have some other instructors, possibly students, come on and do this. So it's going to be a really interesting kind of like smorgasbord of people. And sometimes I probably will just do it by myself. It depends on how chatty I feel. But that's what I likely see this as being going forward. And I'm going to try my absolute best for anyone listening to grab Dave and put him in some sort of stranglehold and get him back in here sometimes too.
I am okay with that.
Yeah, you never fight back. So I think I can probably pin you down for a few. But that's kind of where things are at with this. And again, I can't overstate my gratitude or what you've meant to me, to this industry, to people. It's immeasurable. And I know I speak for everybody when I say thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, man. That's too nice. I don't deserve that.
Oh, I've got a lot more, but I'd probably start to get teary about it.
We're not going down that pathway.
Good. I didn't think you'd like it.
We'll make this comment, and then we're going to be done with it.
Okay.
Maybe I'll make a comment at the very end. But I will say this. I don't look at this as, goodbye. It's like, I'll see you later.
Yeah.
I need a sabbatical. I need some time off. I've been doing this for a long time, and I love this test. I don't love some of the things that have happened to it recently. I think I'm more than open to coming back and talking to you a little bit about things that have been going on, and even why some of the things in the LSAT world are the way that they are. I think a lot of those stories, really from what I consider to the old days, that shaped this test, they'll be lost. So I would like to tell a few of those. Yeah. We'll do that on another day. Let's move forward. You're drinking Macallan. I've had several sips of this last word. I'm mixed feelings on it. I might start drinking this White Russian soon.
Okay.
But I do have, like 2 drinks, I have 2 songs.
Nice.
And they both have meaning to me. And for at least this moment, the first one, of course, one of my favorite bands of all time, the Struts. Just saw them recently. It is their classic from their first album, Kiss This.
Yeah.
Because that's truly how I feel about certain aspects of me leaving. Not the students. Love the students. No, and the other is more a little more mellow, but it's an old Supertramp song from probably 1980, 1981. It's called Goodbye Stranger. It's from the ultimate classic album, Breakfast in America, one of my favorites of all time. If you're not familiar with either of those, go listen to them. They are both great, but they have different messages inside how I'm feeling like this.
Yeah.
And I know, John, you lobbied for a second for Grandmaster Flash because there was a passage that referenced the old Grandmaster.
Yeah.
That normally I would have gone for that because their song, The Message, is killer, but not this time.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously the pick goes to you this time.
That's right.
But we often do these things sort of thematically based on if the test happens to throw us a bone, we do pick a song based on that. There is, as we're going to discuss very shortly, a passage about Grandmaster Flash and hip hop and technological sort of revolutions. And so I thought, well, pick the best Grandmaster Flash song Furious 5, which was The Message. And
it was a great idea until I just stomped on it.
Yeah, so you came in just clobbering things, and that's okay. Like I said, dude, you absolutely get to have your way today.
Well, then if we're having it, let's get moving on.
Okay.
Let's get into the LSAT world. John, you want to run us through a little bit of the October test and the score release and the next test, which is November?
Yeah, we've kind of made a habit of things when we talk about the rest of, like the looking forward part, where we've just kind of kept it to 2025. And I think we should probably continue that. There's only really one test left, although I will mention some October stuff as we go. The October test just happened, weirdly scheduled. It was on a Friday and a Saturday, and then a Monday and a Tuesday. And then Dave and I took Wednesday to just really kind of collect things, collect ourselves, collect our thoughts, catch up on some stuff. We're recording this on a Thursday. It'll come out on a Friday. So it's been kind of a strange process. Normally we do take that extra day in between end of test versus recording. This just got pushed later into a week. That's why you're only hearing this now on a Friday. The score release for this is going to be on a Wednesday morning, October 24th. I'll be gearing up for a birthday. It's kind of fun. I might have a White Russian in your honor, buddy. In your absence.
Great, man. I strongly recommend it.
Thank you.
As you turn 50, you really want to like feel like a little bit extra milk in your bones.
What's sad is that doesn't describe either one of us. Thank God. But the November test is the last one of the year. This is going to be a purely domestic test. October was international, which we'll cover in just a bit. November 25, you've missed the registration deadline by a couple weeks if you haven't signed up for that. So sadly, that's gone. But if you are taking the November test, there are 5 days of it. On November 4th, which I think is a Tuesday, it's in person only, but they just added this recently. So you can sign up and schedule it at a test center. The other days are more normal. The 5th through the 8th, which I think is Wednesday through Saturday, you can take it remotely, you can take it in person. And then the score release for that test is also on a Wednesday, pretty much as always. I want to say it might be the day before Thanksgiving, but it's on November 26th. So something to possibly be thankful about.
I think there's a little bit in there. And of course, as always, if you are taking one of those tests or the January, February, etc. LSATs, we're always running free webinars. And you can sign up, attend, or if you can't attend, you can always get the recording of that. It's usually run by one of our ACE instructors. There's a few coming up. The first is on October 29th, and this is actually a webinar that I wrote a while ago.
Yeah.
It's been refreshed a little bit, and it certainly is applicable. It's called Secrets of the Admissions Process. Obviously, that's the law school admissions process. A webinar that I really like because it talks about things that most people don't know about how the process works, how to shape things, what the admissions committees are actually looking for. Probably Jay Donnell is doing that. He's fantastic. His last webinar had, 500 people attend it.
Yeah, I don't know how many signed up. 1,200 people signed up and 500, I think, were there, which is, I mean, Jay's a stud. And if you guys don't know who Jay Donnell is, you should go check him out. He's
been in our crystal balls, and he's done part of the sections before. He's a top level instructor and an all around good guy.
Yeah.
Then on November 11th, we're doing a reading comprehension webinar. We're going to focus on comparative passages only. Those little weird deals where there's two different viewpoints, passage A, passage B, and they kind of sometimes agree, a lot of times don't. Sometimes they don't even seem like they're talking about the same thing. And then approaching in on the American Thanksgiving, not the Canadian, but the American one, on the 25th of November, we're doing a session on logical reasoning, parallel reasoning, and how to solve those questions. If they ever give you trouble, and those are the long questions that ask for kind of which one of the following answers has the most similar reasoning, we've got a number of killer techniques.
Yeah.
I actually think there's ways to cut through parallel reasoning questions very quickly. You have to know them. Strongly recommend that you attend.
One of my favorite webinars of ours, honestly.
Yeah.
And that is on the 25th, which is the night before. It's the Tuesday night before score release.
That's exactly right. Now, there is another webinar in there, John, and that is, we know the November LSAT is coming up, and so we are going to do a November crystal ball. And for the life of me, I can't remember the exact date. I know it's Tuesday before the November LSAT, so it's sometime here in October. Do you know what the date is?
For the life of me, I think I do remember. I think it's going to be on October 21st. So it's 2 weeks. 2 weeks before the November test kicks off on the 4th of November. But the unique part of this is that Dave won't be there. Talking about you, buddy.
Sad sounds.
I know.
Well.
Yeah, no, I just played a little violin in my head. It sucks.
The tiniest in the world.
Well, it was bigger than that, but it was small. I'm going to miss you terribly, in large part because this just means I have a lot more work to do.
Yeah. That's what you really are complaining about, is that I always do at least half, if not more of the work. Actually, more, usually.
What?
And now you have to do it yourself, so you're chafed about it.
Yeah, I am a little chafed. But now I'll also miss you, too. I can be both.
Sure.
But, if you're free on October 21st?
Got a conflict.
Damn it. I thought you might.
You realize this is like the fourth time you've asked me to show up and do this.
I know. I'm going to beg you till the 21st.
I said this on Reddit.
I'll call you an hour ahead of time. Be like, come on.
I don't look at this as an exit, but a break. But a break means some time off. So call me for January or February if you want to talk about it. Don't call me for November, man.
I'm going to call you every other day and just see what you're doing.
Probably.
How you doing? But no, I'm going to annoy you until you come back. Mostly out of spite and nuisance. But the November crystal ball, it does look like it's going to be held. We haven't put it online yet, so if you hear this before, there's a place to go register for it. Just be patient. But it does look like it's going to be Tuesday, October 21st.
Yeah. And it should be up pretty soon after this post, if not even before it. Let me address one last thing with that crystal ball, John, something that I'm sure you will get asked about numerous times. As we will refer to in just a few minutes, with the October crystal ball, we really generalized it. And we did that, I think, with good reason, and we were right to do so because we wouldn't have predicted the content that they did use. What will we do for November? The short answer, and it's really up to you ultimately, but I know you and I have talked about this, is we'll probably return to some greater specificity, but perhaps not as great as before. So maybe an interim version of this. Yeah. And I think the reasoning behind that will actually become clearer as we talk about the content that they used on this October LSAT.
Yeah, that's precisely right. That's my intention as of now anyway. And we may hear something from them that we decide to trust.
Well, let's start talking about that October test because that is, in fact, the premier event on the table here. So this was an interesting test. As you said, strange schedule, Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. I wouldn't use the word strange. I would use the word stupid. This was a dumb schedule. I don't want to see a test on Friday, Saturday, Monday, Tuesday. It feels like it's over 2 weeks. I'm completely against this. Exactly what stopped us from running Wednesday to Saturday, for example? I don't know, but I'm sure there's some type of explanation out there that, maybe I'll hear in a year. Anyway, when we get into the way the test broke down in terms of numbers, very interesting because Friday and Saturday were significantly larger than the test groups on Monday, Tuesday. Friday was about 7,800 people. Saturday was smaller. You don't often see that, 7,200. And then Monday was the smallest of the 3 days. That was 5,200. And then finally Tuesday was 5,800. And interestingly, about 56% of the test takers were in-person test takers. And my take on it these days is if you can take it in person, you probably should. There's always some issues online. Not everybody, but there's enough that are problematic.
Yeah. It is crazy, though, that Friday had 50% more people than Monday did.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I am never a huge advocate or proponent of taking it day one. I mean, I get the idea of getting it done, but it feels to me like a little bit of a gamble, in person or remote, to take it the first day. I've always said this. You and I had I think we did a whole podcast episode on how to pick the right format and day for yourself. I don't love day one. I definitely don't love remote. I think if you can take it a later day in person, that's probably your best bet. I know some people ran into some scheduling issues though, so we'll touch on that in a second.
Well, it's tough to take it on Monday or Tuesday. And I'm definitely not asking them to do it on Saturday, for example, or rather Sunday. There's just different ways to do this. And, there were a lot of people ultimately taking this exam. As you can see the numbers, you're in the mid 20,000s. That's a lot of people. Now, if you did have problems, and there were a lot of remote complaints, usually with some technical problem or getting kicked out of the test or proctors, there weren't any big systemic issues that we saw. But if you did have a problem, obviously it's catastrophic because you can't finish the test. It's so frustrating. You've been studying forever for it, and now you just get stopped cold. Hopefully you have submitted a complaint and they have given you the retake, which is coming up on Tuesday, October 14th. So we'll see what they do on that exam. John, I know you'll be watching that closely just to see what the content is, but that makeup test usually goes from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern or so.
Yeah, it's a full
significantly smaller. You're not talking about 5,000 people. You're usually talking in the hundreds. But regardless of when you take the test, whether it's one of the first 4 days or whether it is that retake, scores come out on Wednesday, October 24th. Everybody gets it at the same time, even if you took it just 10 days prior as a retaker.
Yeah, which of course is its own degree of frustration because people are like, well, if you can do it in 10 days, why am I waiting 3 weeks? Conversation for another day. Speaking of frustrations, one of the things that we always cover in these test recaps are proctor issues, test issues. Did we see anything that was systemically, calamitous? I didn't, although I heard a huge number of complaints about remote testing in particular. Tech, proctors, Here's the thing, though. When you get 26,000 people testing, the number of complaints you're going to get largely just scales with the number of tests administered. So if there's a failure rate of say, I don't know, 1%, and I'm making that up. Don't anyone quote me on that, please. Dave's writing it down. If there's a failure rate of some percentage, then the more people that take, the more people that encounter it. And so you do see a higher number as just like a per capita. I don't know that I saw a higher percentage this time, but I did see a lot of people who regrettably were affected by proctor issues, tech issues, inabilities to log in. I saw a lot of kind of proctor you death threats and things on Reddit and places. Understandable. Remember, there is the ability to retake the test. It's on next Tuesday, the 14th. And all you have to do is submit a complaint. And if you had a tech issue, you should qualify, be persistent if you get any pushback from LSAC. But there is that sort of safety net there for you. But that was my interpretation, Dave. I don't know if you saw anything that was more systemic.
No, I didn't. And I think, bigger tests, the percentage is probably about the same. There's a fail rate that's kind of built in, unfortunately. And so I didn't think that there was any greater failure than normal. It's just that every time it happens, it's catastrophic. And those students, unfortunately and sadly, are, it's emotional. I completely understand where they're coming from.
Yeah. But one of the questions I got a lot online, and I'll just kind of answer it for anyone who might still be wondering, is when you do have like a test failure, say you're halfway through it, do they let you just kind of pick up where you left off or where you got kicked out? And the answer, sadly, is no. No, it's a full restart with brand new material. So if you're having the best test day of your life and it went sideways, or you're having the worst test day of your life and it went sideways, it doesn't matter. They start you with brand new stuff, things that haven't been seen this week, I hope. I will get to that. But that's what next week is going to look like for retakers. It's just going to be a complete fresh restart. One of the things that I didn't see, and I'll touch on this quickly and then we can actually move on to the content, is I didn't see any reports of what I had seen for 2 tests in a row as problematic, which were issues with the actual administrative, the tech platform, LSAC's platform, where people couldn't click on certain answer choices, where people's answer choices were misformatted, things like that. I didn't see any of that this time. So either that's been corrected or it naturally worked itself out, or I just didn't hear about it. But regardless, it seems to be far less of an issue than it was the last 2 tests, which is great.
It is great. I hope that is the case.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Before we start talking about content, I'm going to run through the full list of disclaimers. Yeah. Usually in the last couple podcast recaps, I've been like, no, I'm just going to read one. Yeah. Since it's the last time,
take your time. All. McAllen time.
Plus, you just gave me a lot of time to drink there. So
yeah, well, I guess
now that we're ready for it, this is some of the ideas, concepts, disclaimers, things that we want you to know about how we do this and how to take this information and consider it in perspective as you listen to us talk about what was on this test. And the first thing is that we will always ask you do not summarize this online. We get into some nuanced discussions. That's always missed when somebody just puts it down in a sentence or two. It's a free podcast. We want people to hear what we said directly. Please just send them to the podcast and please do not summarize this online. Secondly, section order is really irrelevant. Just because you had the same section order does not mean that you had the same test as somebody else. Sections and order of the test change all day long. So somebody was saying, I had RC, LR, LR, RC, and someone else is like, I had that same test. You have no idea if you did or not. You have to talk content to know if you did, because you could have had the same content, but it could have been in different orders, or it could have been the same order, or you could have entirely different content or partially similar content. That is part of the way they do this test these days. If somebody from, took the LSAT 20 years ago was listening, they'd be like, what are you talking about? This is a totally different world than it used to be. Multiple tests given typically every day. That's why the exam is 4 days. They have to keep it moving. When it comes to disclosing information, we really just talk about generalities and topics. We don't talk about specific solutions or answers. LSAC doesn't want you to talk about the test at all. However, they grudgingly have allowed people to talk about the exam once the main administration was over. And for this test, that was Tuesday night. And they had posted something that said, we don't love it, but, wait till it's over. The thing that I will always say, and you will certainly back this up and mention it again later on, is we try to cover all the content we can confirm and feel good about. If we don't hear from somebody who had a section, and sometimes sections are not given to like thousands of people, they might be given to just hundreds or even a few dozen. If we haven't heard about that, we can't really include this and then predict the scoring scale around it. So just be aware of that. And it also means if you don't hear us talk about your content tonight, send us a message.
Yeah.
Send it to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com and we'll add it to the kind of repository of information that they have.
Yeah. Let me interject one thing there before you move on to the next point, which is so many people sent me messages on Reddit over the past week. I'm still almost triple digits in the hole. And trust me, when I say that I've been doing this 20 hours a day since last Thursday, I have been. I still can't keep up entirely. So it's possible someone is going to send me, or Dave, maybe you, a message and be like, but I told you about, and I just won't have seen it yet. It's my fault for just being one person, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Damn. That's one way to put it. It's my fault for being me.
For not working harder.
Yeah. 22 hours a day. But it's very possible that you have sent us a section and I missed it, and I apologize in advance for the possibility of that. We think we've got basically everything covered, but it is possible that something slipped through the cracks or is just lingering in the wings waiting for me to finally get to it. And if that's the case, I'm sorry.
All right, let's continue on.
Keep going,
As we talk about difficulty here and talk about what is harder, less hard, remember that's all relative. When you take a look at the way things work, the LSAT's a difficult test. All the sections are difficult. So when we look at this, we're often saying to ourselves, hey, it's all difficult, but this was really hard. This was less hard. So just keep that in mind as you analyze what we say about this. And also keep in mind that your own perceptions are probably colored by the fact that taking the LSAT when it is a real exam, it feels worse. It's anxiety-ridden. It is fraud-induced, and it is something where you usually, when you look back, your perspectives are colored by that. It feels much worse than taking a PT, and you have to recognize that when you think about not just your performance, but what we say about the test. There's a negativity bias that creeps into things for most people. Just be aware of that. Also, remember that the test makers, especially these days with the China cheating situation, are actively attempting to confuse people, and they're doing weird things. We will talk about that a little bit later in brief, but they will often use similar topics in multiple sections. They've done a few things this time where it's like, we didn't think they were going to do this, but they did. So just be careful about what your recollection is. Confirm the details of a topic in RC or a question in LR before you say that we had the same question. There's many examples of similar topics in sections that were different, but on the same exam. Also, a lot of what we've talked about in the past about real and experimental sections are based upon prior usages and assumptions about how reuse is. Those largely have held true over the years. I think in the China cheating era, which is what I would call this right now, some of those may not hold up, especially going forward. But so far, we've never been wrong about identifying what is a real section. And I'm pretty sure this time we're not wrong either. And again, just to repeat what John said, if we have not heard your section, just let us know. Yeah. It might be your recollection. It might be that we didn't hear about it. Tell us. We get tons of messages after this podcast about, hey, did you guys mention this? Oh, I didn't hear this. And then sometimes we're able to say, yeah, we did talk about that. Occasionally somebody says something where we're like, that doesn't sound like what we talked about, and we can add that to our database. And that database is what we use to recognize what is real, what is new, and also to estimate scoring scales, which we'll do at the very end of this podcast. And then last, of course, the same as the first, please do not summarize this online. That would be so cool if you didn't. Thank you.
For Dave's last podcast, please obey that one rule. I will say, too, it's very possible that there's a third option when it comes to this information, which is not your recollection, which is not that we didn't hear about it. It's that I just couldn't keep up. We had to make a compromise here, and this is part of it. I'm about half a day behind.
Yeah, and let's talk about that when we hit the end point.
I'm trying to get out.
I think in some ways you and I consider this to be partially complete.
Yeah,
not fully complete, which is very rare.
Yeah.
Of course, That's just the kind of thing that happens sometimes. John, international test takers and domestic test takers saw a lot of the same content. So instead of splitting this out into 2 tests, let's do it all as one.
I agree with you.
Big monolithic block of sections. But as usual, I'll allow you to start with a discussion of the crystal ball, because we always go back and we say, we made predictions in the crystal ball. Not totally true this time. How did those work out? And where do we stand with that? So I'll let you address that.
Oh, thanks. Well, as not usual, I'm probably going to drag you back in kicking and screaming, but I'll kick it off anyway. I'll start, which is, look, this was as we talked about before the test began, as we talked about when we were doing that crystal ball, as I think you, very articulately explained in the crystal ball itself for October, which we pre-recorded as opposed to doing the typical live event. This test is sort of a one-off, I hope. It was certainly unique and novel due to the cheating situation and due to some claims that I don't think I'm telling tales out of school here, LSAC made to us, to you in particular, that they would only use brand new content. They weren't going to reuse any scored content. Am I wrong yet?
I don't know. The expectation that I had was that this test was going to be entirely new. That was also the case in September.
Yeah.
It didn't happen either time.
No.
I think I understand as well as possible. I also think that in some respects, they might be running a slight disinformation right now because, hey, you're dealing with several aggressive cheating agencies, and I think they're doing their best to try to thwart those people. So I'm not going to get on my side too upset about it.
Well, then good. All the anger can fall on me. No, it was disappointing to see some of what they did, only because, not because I think they did anything wrong, it's because I think they just told us things that were wrong, and I hate to repeat falsehoods, and that seems like a little bit of what happened. We'll get to it. I hope, again, that's not stepping over too
I don't know if it's a falsehood, but
all right.
Let's not worry about it. It doesn't have any material effect on what was in fact done in the past now. Right.
And I don't think we need to play semantic games anyway. So regardless, our crystal ball that we did for this test was unique as well to kind of match the nature of what we thought the test would be, both in terms of what we were told and what it should have been. We pre-recorded it. It wasn't live, as I mentioned. It lacked a lot of the typical test and section and topic predictions that we have really for 41 prior tests in a row, hinged the crystal ball around, based it around. The nucleus of the crystal ball was those types of predictions. And we didn't feel comfortable doing it this time, so we changed everything up. We had gotten it right 39 out of the prior 41, which is a really pretty remarkable stretch of accuracy. But this time we just didn't have that same kind of confidence, and so we didn't want to portray that confidence to people and then potentially let them down. Now, do I think that we probably, in hindsight, could have run a more traditional crystal ball? I actually do. But given the information that we were dealing with at the time, it was not prudent. It wouldn't have made sense. Fair?
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you there.
I think
the decision that we made in October was the correct decision, and I think the content that they did use proves that. We wouldn't have predicted that.
Okay.
This has already been asked and answered. We had this conversation. This is not the direction that we would have taken with it. Now, that's an interesting point, because that doesn't mean that you can't figure out what November is. But they did things that were different this time, and they were very clear to me, this is going to be different. I feel like there was a lot of honesty about this isn't a regular LSAT in terms of which content we will use at which time. Right. It's a regular LSAT in terms of difficulty, scaling, all that stuff. I'm not saying this was the worst LSAT ever or totally one-off. What I am saying is they had indicated that they are going to make some changes to address this cheating situation. I feel like they did that. We made the right decision in October. I'm 1,000% convinced of that.
I agree with you there. I'm saying
let's not litigate it.
Well, yeah, there's no point in litigating, at least not publicly.
I'm not going to be here for 3 hours tonight because you want to litigate this. I'm going to tell you that right now.
And I will say this to Dave's point. The test itself, you can't really singular, but the plurality of the test itself, on the whole, I don't think this was as challenging as some LSATs that we've seen even this year. I think August probably might take that ribbon. That was a rough one. Parts of September were really pretty brutal. There were really difficult things that happened over the past week, which we're about to get to, but nothing that happened here would qualify itself as uniquely or specially difficult. But it did, I think, kind of prohibit us from trying to be as crystal ball specific as we have been in the past. Dave's right. I think we did make the right decision to just kind of generalize a bit more. Those generalities, from what I heard from people, were quite useful. For instance, things like, you're probably going to see questions of this nature. I heard a lot of people being like, dude, you wouldn't believe how many pointed issue questions I saw. And I said, well, I would believe that. In fact, I talked about it. You wouldn't believe how many necessary assumptions I saw that were of this sort. I was like, I would absolutely believe that too. I also talked about it. So I did get a lot of that kind of feedback. So people who paid attention to that crystal ball, they didn't get like reading comp topics by design, but they did get information that did turn out to be fairly prescient regardless. I don't think, though, that this is a test that we can self-assess.
No, we didn't make specific predictions about either content used in terms of old reused tests or about specific RC. So to me, this is not attempted. It's an NA.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Instead of us kind of like, forwardly talking about what happened or not, let's do the sections and then use those to actually have this conversation, because there are some things in here that I think you and I will say, we didn't expect that.
Yep.
So John, how about I start with some RC?
I'd love for you to, buddy.
I will do at least the first two, and then I might just be like, it's all yours.
Oh, that's a fair split, because there were 4.
All right. So when you look at Friday morning, here's the test coming out. One of the things that surprised us is we really thought there wasn't going to be any material reused. That wasn't the case, and that was pretty clear almost immediately. They began using a section from November 2024, so this was a test reuse, and I'll address that when I finish going through the topics. This was not the easiest section in the world, I'll tell you that right now, although it does have a cool passage about Peru and Chile fighting over Pisco. And the last time we talked about this in November of 2024, I had a Pisco Sour as my drink for that, so that was kind of cool. But the first passage in this section was 27 questions, was Peru and Chile fighting over this liquor, and cultural concerns kind of like outweighing or overriding economic concerns. So it was probably the easiest passage there. Yeah. Then there was another one about etiquette compared with morals, and Philippa Foot says there's no reason to follow etiquette, but etiquette serves social functions. Mm-hmm. I'm not big on etiquette, so this doesn't sound like fun to me. Then we have some economists coming in, and I was an econ major at school, so this probably would bore me as well. But positivist economists needing to consider how moral considerations influence people's economic decisions. And usually when the LSAT talks about morality, I just want to tune out. Yep. I hate those questions. Whoever writes them, I never want to meet that person. But this was the comparative passage. Mm-hmm. They might have put an economic spin on it, but once we talk about how moral considerations influence economic decisions, I'm like, I'm not interested in what LSAC has to say about morality. That's just me, though.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Then we have the hardest passage, the one that a lot of people have called like C. diffusa, or they've talked about the invasive plants and grass. You saw a lot of that online. And really in this one, it's not insects and predation, but biochemical adaptations about which one is dominant and so forth. This was a really, really tough passage, and people came out, I think, scarred by it, shell-shocked to some extent. And one of the first questions that we got, John, was why is it that, you guys were thinking there's going to be a lot of new material, and then we have this test reuse. And I'll explain very simply why we thought that.
And such a recent test reuse, I should mention, 11 months, which is unprecedented.
Let's address both of those points. First off, the recency here is unprecedented. It is very, very recent. And I think this was a move to say, we're going to use something that no one expects, that they wouldn't have prepared for as much because it is too recent. So that's part of that. It also boils down to the idea of this section, even though it is from a prior LSAT, is not in the trove of stolen tests. So LSAC is saying, well, it wasn't stolen, so we can reuse this. And this is something that they didn't, perhaps intentionally so, they didn't alert us to as a direction they were taking. And that might have been because, look, cheaters can go listen to the crystal ball too. Yeah. And if we tell them the exact sections to go study, they can say to themselves, all right, I'll spend some more time with that. Here, if they don't think that anything's coming, maybe they don't study those sections in the same way. And so I think this was all done as part of an anti-cheating campaign. The faster reuse of this section, the fact that they reused anything, but also the fact that it wasn't in the stolen grouping of tests. Anything that we saw that was reused on this test, and there was some definitely other stuff, was not in the group of stolen materials. Let's just leave it at that. Let's go to the second.
I'm biting my tongue. Go.
We're not going to get into a long debate about
we're not going to get into
what
any
they've
debate.
done or what they haven't done. I have many, many thoughts about it, but I don't think people want to hear that right now. They want to hear what the next real section was.
I bet they
All
might.
right, so
Keep going.
C diffuse and all that was a real section. Here's another real section. This was also 27 questions, and this was not a section that we had seen before, but it had Chilean folk music and Violeta Parra and kind of like a band that had covered her songs like 20 years later, but changed the style into kind of like a more punk pop or pop rock kind of style. Then there was a passage, a comparative one, about treaties with the UN and the Bill of Rights, talking about human rights and the basis of empathy, kind of back in the 1600s and 1700s. Then you had another economics passage, so this test would have been good for me. Economics of theater, including the cost disease theory by the economists Baumol and Bowen. Again, I don't know if that sounds super exciting to me. And here, one more time, we have another science passage that was not really great for a lot of people. Different ways you could describe this, really about human evolution, and kind of like the idea of plant and animal evolution, but it mentioned chlorophyll, and that was what a lot of people kind of like sunk their teeth into, and you saw it mentioned online as like this chlorophyll passage, but it talked about blood hemoglobin, microorganisms, biological classification, and difficulties back in the 1940s. This was a really hard passage without question, John.
Yeah, a really hard section overall too. Also a new section, best we could tell. I don't have any source for this the way that we had a source for the one you just talked about with Pisco and the C diffuse grass. So this, they did kind of live up to their word on delivering new material, but very difficult stuff from what I could tell.
It's not difficult because it's new. It's difficult just because it's difficult.
Yeah.
Not all new material is difficult, just FYI.
In fact, as we'll talk about, the easiest section, and keep in mind this is just relative, the easiest RC section was new. It's the one I'm about to talk about. And I don't know that everyone I'm going to tell about this is going to agree with me. But from the reports that we got, what seemed to be the easiest of the 4 scored sections was this. 27 questions, again, a new section, so I don't have a source for it. One of the passages that we'd actually seen from this same year, Dave, interestingly enough, January of this year, it was experimental, was about, we mentioned this at the very beginning of the episode, Grandmaster Flash, Public Enemy, and DJs and hip-hop innovators, and how technological innovation kind of affected and influenced their music. That's a passage that we were familiar with, but we hadn't seen it scored before. So this section, again, would count as new under our kind of nomenclature. There was a passage in here, the law passage, about contract law, standardized mass contracts, contracts of adhesion. I have no idea what that is. There was a passage in here about alternative archaeology and aliens. I'd be fascinated to read that. And then one that would probably be most at home for me, philosophy and science, scientific methodology with Karl Popper and Kuhn and Weinberg. I'm guessing that's Steven Weinberg. But that section was probably the easiest of the 4. And if you had it and you're like, it's the worst thing I've ever read, sorry to burst your bubble.
It's relative, though.
Yeah, of
Still
course.
hard. It's just the easiest of the 4. It doesn't mean it's easy.
Precisely.
Don't make the relativity flaw.
Yeah, exactly. Well done. And then there was one more section of real reading comprehension that we saw this week. And this, to me, from what I could tell, primarily appeared either late Monday night or through most of Tuesday, so the final testing days. And this, I'll be honest with you, man, this one really surprised me. I didn't think they would dust something like this off, given what they had told us and given their what should be concerns and suspicions. But here we are. This was February of 2023, reused again in November of 2024, possibly more than that. It contained these 4 passages. There was one about an African-American community in Brooklyn, Illinois, how they became kind of powerful in the Republican Party and helped to integrate schools. The comparative passage in this was about people's taste for music. It was an evolution passage, whether people's taste for music is an evolutionary adaptation or serves no purpose. I think I get the impression from that passage, Dave, for whatever it's worth, that it kind of touched on the idea of like, if we share a common taste in music, that maybe we're more physically attracted or compatible. That's the vibe.
It's a good thing you and I don't like the same music at all then.
Yeah, I don't think
Thank God.
I'm never going to pursue you sexually.
Thank you.
But only because of the music. There was a passage in there about incubation, which it was like a psychological thing, as a method to stop thinking about like a puzzling issue, so something that's driving you crazy, and sort of putting into your subconscious to arrive at some solution, figuring things out basically by letting them dwell in your subconscious. And then finally a passage in there as well about the difference between having the right to do something and being, quote, morally right to do something, and then potentially disobey the law, which I find that actually kind of fascinating.
Another difficult kind of like
hard
reuse
section.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not in the stolen trove of tests. So
allegedly.
Some justification of this. Actually, I'm positive that it's not in there.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with that first one about the Pisco as well. That being said, it's not what we expected.
Mm-mm.
I guess still LSAC can throw out some new tricks. But I think that this is all happening because they're trying to stop cheaters. The interesting thing is, John, is we can go back, and the vast majority of LSATs that you ever look at, they reuse some material and they bring in some new material. Mm-hmm. So in this respect, this LSAT actually had a lot of normalcy to it. But to reuse content from November 24, you can see that's a slight change there. The claim is that more people saw new material than saw reused material, by the way, by maybe a 3 or 4 to 1 number. Overall, I can't justify that or know it because we just don't see the test taking numbers specifically. We just see the broad test taking. But let's jump then to the experimentals, and I'll do these, John, and then I'll leave LR to you since I know you love it so much.
Yeah, that's so generous of you. Thanks.
You had such a good time doing the LR and kind of compiling all that information that I feel as if it is just, it's your right and honor to do that LR.
Thank you. If I break down in the middle of it, you'll understand why.
Yes. As soon as he starts talking about it, you'll be like, yes. These sections were not scored. There are 2 RCs in here. The first one, I think, was 27 questions. A lot of people who had the Pisco passage set also had this one. And you had 4 different passages in there as usual. One was about courtroom docs in the UK, and that was a comparative passage. Another was about egocentrism and viewing things from the other side. Something, John, that I think would probably help you.
Come on.
And then there was modern versus traditional architecture styles. And then finally, the problem of highway and road noise versus safety. That's right. This is the last time, so I'm just taking it out on you. This is super fun for me.
I didn't know I was going to leave this bruised. All right.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to leave you battered when I'm done with this. So that was experimental. And then you had another experimental that was a tough section. Also 27 questions. A lot of people who had the chlorophyll section and the Chilean music had this one as their paired if they had an RC experimental. This was double jeopardy and its historical basis. Antibiotic drug development and stewardship, kind of like, dealing with the resistance through economic incentives and advisory boards. That was the comparative.
Yeah.
One about Delia Bacon and Francis Bacon and the idea of whether or not Francis Bacon actually wrote the works attributed to Shakespeare. And this is kind of like a kind of conspiracy theory. It was like maybe Bacon actually was Shakespeare. And the funny thing is that the person writing about this theory is also called Bacon, but they're not related at all. It's Delia Bacon.
Yeah.
And then we also had kids distinguishing between what something is and what it looks like, talking about things like rocks and things like that.
Yeah.
Perception.
Mm-hmm. So there you go.
That was also experimental. That is what we saw. The RC these days, just like in the old days with logic games, so much easier to pin down because, well, wait a second, there's only 4. And most people have a really good recall. And one of the things I noticed about this particular test, and I don't know why it was that a lot of people walked out with decent or okay RC recollection and not great LR recollection.
Yeah.
So when I made that comment before, it's your privilege and honor to cover LR, I was obviously being somewhat sarcastic because we had troubles with the LR. And one of the things that always happens here is our goal is to make sure that whatever we say is accurate. That's why we always ask for people to write us afterwards and say, hey, I saw this or I didn't see this, because we want to make sure that it all lines up, because that helps future test takers. We think there's probably more LR. In fact, I'm almost certain there's more LR out here than what we have, but we couldn't quite get it straight. And you still have messages to go through. We were really just running out of time. And so maybe what'll happen is if we get more information beyond what you talk about here, you can come back at some point and update this, whether it's on Reddit or Twitter X or whatever the case may be. But with that kind of predictive or discussion beforehand, I'll set the table for you. John, talk about some LR here.
Oh, thanks. Aren't you a gentleman? Yeah, part of the dilemma that we ran into here, frankly, is we did kind of run out of time. When you get a test that's this big, and October, remember, isn't just for domestic test takers. There's people overseas too. And there are all of these fraught concerns about how to distribute information, disseminate content, and make sure that people aren't allowed or clearly able to cheat. What you find is that they do tend to use a lot of things, and they tend to use them in sparing ways often. We saw this in September, where the reused content, September best we could tell, was only used for people taking paper and pencil tests. We talked about it. That was very unusual, but it also made it very difficult to track because it was just a very small cohort of folks. With LR, what I think has probably happened is that almost everybody got the sections that I'm about to cover, because Dave so generously allowed me to. And some people very likely got additional scored sections that just, for whatever reason, kind of fell past our radar, my radar. I'll take the blame. So if you don't hear what you had and you're like, oh, they had 2 LRs and you only talked about one of them, that's my bad. I'm sorry. Feel free to message me, as Dave said, but that's...
Yeah, just message us.
Yeah. And then I'll try to give you my best, what I think most people are here to learn. I'll try to give you my best scoring estimate for what that section would be in terms of the scaling or the curve. I'm not mad about doing that. Here is one known, real logical reasoning section. Part of the difficulty in tracking all of this is it was brand new, as expected. It had questions about like hordes of items, toys, figures, something, buried underneath some building. I really want to read this question. During marriage ceremonies. I don't know, somebody was trying to hide it from their spouse. There was a lady named Diana who was defending a study about urban farms, when a majority of the problem is with coastal farms competing with imports. I don't know what just happened, but sorry, my little screen with the list just jumped. I'm getting there. You can do.
No, it was
talk
unnoticeable until you made a comment about it.
Well, it's not unnoticeable to me because I have to scroll back down and find episode 173. Sorry, you can talk if you want.
I'm happy to. Actually, John, I think that hordes of items being buried under the building during a marriage ceremony is probably some kind of ceremonial thing of like passing from youth to adulthood.
Oh, do you think? I thought it was somebody being like, no, you can't have my half, and here's how I'll hide my...
I mean, you may be right. I haven't read the question.
Doesn't this say a lot about both of us?
Yes, my take on it is probably this is part of the ceremony is like, all right, we are passing from our youth to being adults now, we're getting married, and let's put away childish things by burying the toys and the figures and dolls and all that kind of stuff.
Mine was straight like, you'll never get my Beanie Babies or whatever.
Don't get married.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Who would say yes? I think I have the greater threats on them. All right, I'm back. So
I know someone who would say yes.
Yeah, but she's already married to you. Here's the rest of this section. Did you get
No,
it?
she's not.
You dumb.
I won't let that stand. My wife, in response to that question from you, would be like, absolutely not, and go to throw herself off a cliff.
What? No,
yes.
She would just cheat. Here's the rest of this. What? Here's the rest
absolutely
of this
false.
section.
We're not allowing that.
All right, fine. You said your piece. I know what I believe. There was an artist who, according to the reports that I got, worked in relative obscurity until 1826. And then he opened some art school, took in his first students. And then there was a question about, I guess, like primacy or priority as to who made certain art pieces. Was it the guy or the people in his school? 2 people, Stanton and Hernandez, who go on a trip and each paid for certain things in certain areas, paid for each other. Stan paid for rooms, Hernandez paid for meals, and the question, I guess, then became like, who came out ahead, or how did they break even? One of the most talked about questions in this section, and this may ring a bell for a lot of people, was a Jupiter-sized planet that was discovered orbiting a star, I think 7 million kilometers or something away from a star that's, if it's the star I'm guessing, which is 51 Pegasi, that's about 10% larger than our sun, and 10% is massive, more massive. I'm guessing that's what that question is about. There's a company in this section advertising with some celebrity or some actor, and it talked about the consumer base and whether it increased. And then interestingly, a question about antiperspirant, so deodorant, and substances that should be avoided because your skin absorbs the aluminum in it, and it can cause cancer.
I've heard that.
Yeah. You can buy aluminum-free deodorant, by the way, and it won't stain your black shirts. It's just a pro tip. But there you go. All of those were in a single section, best I can tell. It's new, and it's definitely real. So if you had that section as one of your 3 LRs, it counted. Another one of the real LR sections that we saw, and these, for the most part, I saw paired together. So that Jupiter planet orbiting a star section was paired with these. It was museum construction, closing, and regular visitors then not coming back, I think, when it reopened. One of the most talked about questions was these house inspectors. There were 10 of them, qualified inspectors that inspect the same house to catch issues, and each sort of identifies different sets of structural problems, but only 3 caught everything. I think that was a bit of a logic games type of a question, something that you and I, Dave, have talked about in our crystal balls, even for this, as being aware of and prepared for. A question in here, Dave, you'll know more about this than I will for sure. Super tasters, and that they apparently are able to detect a certain type of bitterness better than other people, but salt interferes with it, and they have higher blood pressure. I don't know if you want to interject about the topic, but something that a guy in wine country would know. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with super tasters because in the wine world, they are, I wouldn't say prevalent, but they tend to be able to figure things out much more fine line. I can say this, I'm not a super taster. I'm like, this tastes good.
Yeah, I know.
No, I can get to the level of like, I think there are plum notes in here, but when people are like, there's horsehair, I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that, man.
Yeah,
it's too far beyond.
I can't taste anything, but explains what I'm drinking and who I date. There was a question in this section about, they were trying to increase the cost of a health club membership, and it was a mistake. People didn't renew their health club subscription, I guess. There was a lady, Sarah, who plans meticulously but is unfazed by unexpected encounters, so she's a good negotiator. That, again, was one of those logic games types of questions. There's more questions in this section. I'm going to just cut a couple out. One was the Excelsior Hotel, which was a 10-minute walk away, but it had like 2 or 3 requirements for being an oceanfront property, whether it was an award-winning. If you had that question, you would remember it because everyone is talking about that. And then the last one that I'll mention is about craters on a moon. I think it was Europa, orbiting a planet, and then volcanoes versus asteroids, and what caused the craters versus what could potentially eliminate the craters that volcanoes could remove traces of impacts.
Yeah, and don't forget the important question for British people, tea leaves versus tea bags.
Yeah, that was in there too. British people and frat guys. Get it? All right. And then there was one more section of real LR content. Again, we know this was real. It's a little tricky to predict the origin of some of it because it feels a little, I don't want to say mixed and matched because I think that would give people a very wrong impression. But some of these felt, and I heard this from a lot of people, if you go online, you'll see a lot of people saying this, very familiar or similar to things that they had seen previously, either in release tests or maybe even at past tests that they took. But these were real. There was one about hatchback cars, I think a showroom, Alame, and the weight of these cars. There was one, and this is the question I think that got a lot of attention from memory, was about a crest or a shield, and it might have been a story about King Arthur, at least the novelization, and had lions and leopards on it. I think we had seen that before. Bach, the Bach's intention with vocal performers and cantanas. I think Mozart might have been mentioned in that as well. And then hospital checklists. I don't know any more details about that question, although I would love to. What are they checking? What's the list?
Your sister's a nurse, ask her.
My sister's a professor. Thank you very much.
Well, I thought she, whatever.
Nah, she teaches hospital stuff.
Yeah, I'm not wrong about this.
I'm not crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, but I'll run that one by her this week. She'll love that. But that's another real section of LR. But of course, now we kind of run to the end of what we can confirm with confidence as real. And that's what Dave was alluding to before, is that we do suspect that there probably are more LR sections out there.
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, I suspect you're very right. I hate when you're right, but you're probably right. And we just either didn't get to them or they didn't catch our attention. If that is the case, if you heard that and you're like, I had 2 LRs and you only mentioned one of mine, please message me the other. Because I would love to update this list. I will very effusively issue a public apology as to the fact that we were partial here. And of course, Dave will be gone, so he gets off the hook.
Truly. But, typically there's more than 3. But as I said before, we're not going to kind of like go down this path of, well, we know there's this one question that doesn't seem to be in these 3 sections, so that was real. That is a difficult game to actually play.
Yeah,
so
man, that's what I kept running into, is I would see a single question and I'd be like, this is it. And what it turned out to be was a part of one of those 3 lists that I just mentioned already. And so everything just kind of kept fitting back into those 3, despite my suspicion that there's probably at least a 4th. So,
all right.
There we go.
That was a long road with a lot of side trips to various places. I'm sure
talking about my
like,
sister.
Please get to it, the real deal. All right, let's talk about the scoring scale predictions, what we call the matrix. And even though there was an international test, they didn't have to do this before. So this is the first time in this podcast since we covered all that content together. What are we trying to do? We're trying to use the difficulty predictions about the sections to estimate how many questions you can miss to get a 170. That then gives you a general sense of whether this scale is looser or tighter. So it can have an ultimate real-world scoring impact. When we estimate this and we try to figure out how many questions you can miss for a 170, we start with the idea that you can miss 7. And then what we do is we go through each section and we kind of rate it. Usually, typically, no effect, a little bit of effect, or a lot of an effect in terms of loosening the scale. And of course, we've done that. So the way to do that for yourself is to listen and say, all right, start at -7. Then when you hear your RC, adjust or keep it the same if it's a 0. And then when you hear your LR, you may not hear all of it tonight, go ahead and make that same adjustment for both of the sections. And if you don't hear your section tonight, then make your own estimation. Like, I hated that 3rd section. I didn't hear it, but I thought it was really hard. Then go ahead and add 1 to it. So that is how this actually works out. Let's start off with the 4 scored RC sections. The first one was that November 24 section about the Pisco and the etiquette and the positive economists and the C. diffusa hellgrass that everybody had to deal with. We've talked about this before. We talked about it in November 2024. It most assuredly moves the scale by 1. So if you were unfortunate enough to have this, you've just gone from 7 to 8, which means that you actually have a little bit more room. You can miss an extra question because you faced something that was harder. That's how this test works. If your sections are all hard, the scale loosens. If your sections are all relatively easy, the scale would tighten. It's been a while since we've tightened the scale, but this is one that moves it by 1. Here's another one that does that. It's that new section about Chilean music, human rights and empathy, the cost disease theory, and what we'll call chlorophyll. That would also move it by 1 question. And then we come to the 3rd of the 4 sections. This was the one with Grandmaster Flash, the contract law, archaeology, science, and philosophy. We do not think that this moves the scale. We think this keeps it at 0. So if you did think it was hard, I'm sorry that it doesn't. It's all about the collective, not the individual, though. And then last, we get to the 4th and final of the scored passages. This was the Brooklyn, Illinois, the music taste, incubation, and the right to do versus morally right. That was a difficult section as well. And so that would move it by 1. So a lot of people come out of this having gone from 7 to 8. A subsection, though, stays at 7 accordingly. Let's move to LR, and we're very nearly done with this.
Don't say that.
On. Yeah, I'm happy. Plus, I want to go get another drink.
I mean, I know.
All right, get into LR. So everybody's at 7 or 8 right now. We'll start off with that first one that had urban farms, expenses on a trip, the Jupiter planet orbit, company celebrity ads. We think this is a pretty reasonable section in terms of difficulty, and it does not move the scale. Then we go to the museum construction, house inspection, the super tasters, and the moon craters. Actually, we're going to say that this moves the scale by 1 on difficulty. So if you had this, you loosen up another 1. So if you were at 7, you now would go to 8. If you're at 8, you would now go to 9. And then the third scored section that we can confirm, the one with the King Arthur crest with lions and leopards, box intentions, the cantatas, that we think is also more towards the middle. Remember, like all LRs, there's tough questions in there. It's not about, was there a tough question? There's how many tough questions were there? We don't think this moves the scale, and so this would not change thing. So find your RC, try to find your 2LR, and then make that adjustment, and that gives you an idea. And remember that we try to be as conservative as possible with this because that tends to help people in estimating their possible scores. It minimizes the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And again, if you didn't hear your section, whether it was RC or LR, send a message to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com and let us know. We would love to hear from you and hash this out. And hopefully the more you remember about the section, the more questions and the more sure you are, the easier that is to kind of collate with all the other information. Because right now we've got a ton of piecemeal stuff floating around, and that's been John's personal hell all week. Mine a little bit, but not as much as his.
My personal hell all week, Dave, is that it's your last week.
That is also the case, but regardless of that,
I can survive a test. It's going to be hard to live
we
without.
got through this.
It's
Part
hard
of the
to live
reason
without
I
you,
chose this day to leave was because I knew that we would do the podcast before I was, had the chance to leave, and so I wanted to get that last podcast recap in. And of course, it turned out to be a weird one and maybe the longest ever. I don't know. I will say this, John. As you said before, we've done over 170 episodes of this together. You've been an awesome co-host, man. Thanks, really buddy. Appreciate everything that you put into this and your many myriad of jokes, some of which I know slip under the radar, but not to me. I hear them all.
Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Why aren't you laughing more?
I heard your frat boy joke earlier.
Okay.
Trust me, I heard it all.
Too? Okay.
Yeah, I caught it.
Teabag joke.
I usually try not to comment because I don't want to Streisand affect your ridiculous comments and bring... attention to them, but I do appreciate them in a certain way.
Thanks, Bo.
Not always the way you'd hope I would.
No.
But regardless, man, it's been a pleasure doing this. And to all the LSAT students out there, it has been my absolute pleasure to help people over the years. I don't know what'll happen after I take a break here. Maybe stay tuned. Maybe you won't ever see me again. No answers there. But that is what I have to say. Much thanks for the opportunity just to speak to everybody. It's a rare opportunity to be able to do that, and to have the kind of listenership that we've had is truly rare. It's like lightning in a bottle to some extent, and I really am honored by that and humbled by it and appreciate it.
Well, you've been an unrivaled gift, and I know that anyone who's paid any attention to either of us over the years would say nothing but sing your praises, man. So I certainly would as well. So I can't tell you what a pleasure and a privilege it's been. Thank you for everything.
Appreciate it. And I wish you the best of luck going forward. Like I said, I'll come back for a few guest appearances. Just to make your life easier and also harder.
I'm not going to let Dave stray too far. I know where he lives.
I know where you live too.
Yeah, I know.
Also, I know your girlfriend up here, so I can tell her all the terrible things that you do.
Lowercase g.
Oh, whatever. On that auspicious note, especially after the marriage discussion.
Love you, buddy.
If you get a chance, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else that you may find it. And if you've enjoyed it, leave us a comment and a rating as well, but only if it's 5 stars. We don't like anything less. If you have any questions or if you have any section reports, I will say this one more time, please send those to lsatpodcast@powerscore.com. On behalf of John and myself, stay safe out there. And on behalf of myself, I've appreciated the opportunity to talk to all of you. Hope to talk to you again soon someday. Take care.